As we talked about before, public companies have, in addition to the requirement of having their financial statements audited, they also have to have an audit of their internal control. Now, there are some qualifications to this. Not every public company has to have an audit of internal control. So there's a couple different rules we use to determine which particular companies need to have this integrated audit, where they have kind of the secondary audit of internal control added to the financial statement audit. So we have three categories kind of compiled by the SEC, primarily based on the size of the company in terms of their outstanding common equity. Just remember, equity is we're talking about market value here, so the market cap of their stock. If you added up all their outstanding shares, the value of all those outstanding shares, that would be their outstanding common market equity. So any large accelerated filer falls in this category here, where they have at least 700 million in outstanding common equity. All right, so any company that has more than 700 million in outstanding common equity, they are required to have this audit of internal control in addition to the audit of their financial statements. Also, we have here accelerated filers. If they have between 75 and 700 million in market cap and at least 100 million in annual revenues, all right, they are also required to have an audit of their internal control. Notice it's this very last category. There's kind of two subcomponents to the rules that determine whether a company falls under this bucket. Basically, companies that are considered non-accelerated filers, they don't have to have audits of their internal control. So if a company has between 75 and 700 million in outstanding common equity and less than 100 million in annual revenues, they are not required to have an audit of their internal control. So notice that's kind of the adverse or the inverse case of what we have here with accelerated filer. If they're between this kind of level of common equity and have at least 100 million in annual revenues, they do have that audit of internal control. But if they have less than 100 million in annual revenues, they don't have to have that audit. Also, if you have less than 75 million in outstanding common equity, there's no revenue limitation. So any company that has less than a $75 million market cap, all right, they don't have to have an audit of their internal control, even if they are a public company. So it's really just the companies that kind of fall in these two categories that have to have that additional audit of internal control. So when we're looking at internal control, again, it's the idea of reasonable assurance. Just like when we're talking about the audit of the financial statements, we don't have absolute assurance. The auditor can't provide, ironclad assurance that everything in the financial statements is correct because of those limitations we talked about in the past. And so, as we discussed before, if we have good working internal control, all right, it's more likely that the financial statements are going to be free of material misstatements. And recall that we looked at the different auditing standards that are published by the PCAOB, and those are the ones, remember, that govern public companies. We have this auditing standard 2201. This is kind of a subcategory of that chart that we looked at before, and this is kind of the rules governing the audit of internal control. So if we kind of go back to that chart, recall these are all the different auditing standards. They have the AS prefix. We'll see as we move along in the course. That's the designation for the PCAOB's auditing standards. Recall again, the AICPA, they have their own auditing standards board that comes up with different standards that govern private companies. So these are the standards put out by the PCAOB, again, that govern the audits of public companies. And notice here under 2200, these are kind of general categories going by hundreds. There's, of course, subcategories here. The 2200 level is auditing of internal control over financial reporting. So notice specifically, standard 2201 would fall under there. So if you had questions about any of the rules or regulations auditors have to follow when they're doing this integrated audit where they look at both financial statements and internal control, all right, it would be kind of under that 2201, and there's different topics revolving around internal control that you could find in the 2200 level of the topics put out by the PCAOB. So remember this word issuer, again, that's just another term for a public company. They're actually issuing stock. All right, so we have a standard format for the auditors report when they audit internal control, just kind of like we had a standard report for the audits of financial statements. Remember, the reports differed based on whether it was a private or a public company. Same idea here. Auditors kind of have a preset format for the report that they publish on internal control. And what companies are looking for is an unqualified report. So that's kind of the term that says that the auditors are signing off that internal control looks pretty good within the particular company. The last topic we're going to address in this chapter is the idea of the differences in expectations between the end users of the financial statements, like investors, suppliers, customers, and the auditors that actually audit the financial statements. So perhaps you as an investor, when you're reading a company's financial statements, maybe you're putting more stock into the fact that it's audited than you actually should. You may have expectations about what audited financial statements mean, and sometimes this can create issues. Remember, the whole point of the auditing process is to help society out as a whole, to give assurance that the numbers companies put out are accurate, and this helps improve the efficiency of the economy. Investors, suppliers, customers have better numbers to work with. They can make better decisions, which helps society as a whole. Now, we can kind of note some of the differences between user expectations, so the folks that actually rely on the financial statements, and the reality of the situation. So somebody reading a financial statement, say they're looking at kind of, let's say, General Motors financial statements for the most recent fiscal year. If somebody's reading those and they say, oh, this is an audited financial statement, the auditor signed off that, it's an unqualified opinion, the internal control looks good, they might think, well, the auditor's giving us absolute assurance that all the numbers in these financial statements are right. Well, we know that's not the case. The auditor doesn't give assurance that everything's exactly correct to the penny in the financial statements. They're giving reasonable assurance that there's not material misstatements. All right, so that's kind of a disconnect with what maybe the end users, the people relying on those financial statements, think it means when they see audited financial statements and what the reality of the situation is. Also, folks reading the financial statements might see that they're audited with a good opinion and think, okay, well, this company, they can't possibly go out of business. The auditor signed off on the financial statements. The auditor giving an unqualified opinion doesn't mean that they're saying that the company is going to continue indefinitely and never go into bankruptcy. They're just basically saying the financial statements are free of material misstatements. So a couple other situations where there's a disconnect between user expectations and reality. Again, we talked about this idea that unqualified, unmodified opinions doesn't mean there's no issues with the statements. And again, the auditor can't find necessarily all instances of fraud. They're going to assess the risk of fraud. The auditor is going to conduct tests to try to uncover fraud, but the methods they use are not foolproof, right? Something can kind of fly under the radar that the auditor didn't catch. And the end users relying on those financial statements might not really be aware of that. So that's part of the audit expectation gap. And again, we talked about the idea when we conduct an audit, the auditor is only looking at a sample of transactions. It's not cost effective for the auditor to look over every journal entry made for a company. So In this course, we're going to talk about how auditors actually plan the audit to most efficiently try to guarantee the accuracy of the financial statements. So basically, auditors are going to kind of put more time and effort in areas where there's high levels of risk of a material misstatement or high levels of risk of fraud, revenue accounts, cash accounts. There's a lot of effort put into overseeing those accounts during an audit because those are places historically where there could be problems. But again, they're not going to give 100% guarantee that every transaction is correct. And a couple of different things we could do to reduce this expectation gap. On the auditor side, just really being diligent about following the PCAOB's rules that govern audit, complying with those standards, having proper supervision of the audits, and also to help reduce this expectation gap. The organizations that set these standards, need to apply rules that help the auditors actually do their job well, and they also have to promote communication between the auditing profession and the end users of financial statements, particularly investors. So we see here there's two different gaps: expectation gap and performance gap. So we kind of talked about this at length 2 slides back, that expectation gap is just the idea that the end users have different expectations, maybe in some cases, about what it means to have an audited set of financial statements that have a good, unqualified, unmodified opinion, and it's maybe different than what that opinion actually means. And also we have what is called the performance gap. All right, so expectations gap means, hey, the auditors did a good job, in the audit, but just basically end users are expecting more than what the audit can guarantee. The performance gap means the auditors actually aren't doing their job correctly. So maybe they don't follow policy, they don't have good oversight, maybe they have individuals working on the audit that don't have the requisite experience or knowledge to properly conduct the audit. All right, so if that's the case, that's an issue on the auditor side, right? That's them not performing their function properly. Expectation gap is kind of the disconnect between an actually accurately audited set of financial statements and what the end users expect. All right, so that does it for chapter number 1. If you have any questions after reviewing this, please let me know, and have a great day.